We'll call to order and start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will skip the open forum because I don't think, do we have anyone joining us today? Okay, so we'll skip the comments there, move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda 4A, approval of the minutes, consider approval of minutes from March 13th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And when my fellow commissioners have a moment, we'll hear a motion once they review it. Take your time. I think we've got some time, so. Elena, how are our meetings captured? Is it purely noted, or is it taken by notes, or is it recorded?
It's recorded, so we have video, audio recording for every meeting, and then Amy does like a summary.
Okay, so that she's able to go back and look at the video to, okay,
Yeah.
just curious.
And so depending on the discussion, sometimes we provide a little additional detail, and sometimes we provide less. If there's a lot of things that you're all kind of saying, try to summarize it. And so it's not meant to be like a transcript per se,
Yeah.
just kind of capturing main ideas and things like that.
Understood. Thank you.
I have a question about the minutes here.
Mhm.
It says that I made a motion to present the various subdivision design standards.
Yes, ma'am.
Were those really design standards, or were they zoning options?
Um,
Because I thought design standards were like what the house has to look like and,
yeah.
So
So there's like architectural design standards, which would be, like the style of a home, the character of a home. And then your subdivision design standards are like the layout of the subdivisions. So those are considered subdivision
Okay.
design guidelines. Some of those could also double as a zoning district, like small lot subdivisions, how we talked about those. That would probably need some sort of zoning amendment, because unlike the cluster one we talked about, where you could have like the same overall density and have different, various lot sizes, the small lot type would just be small lots. It wouldn't have the variety. So some of those could just be additions to the sub-regs, and some of those could actually be zoning ordinance amendments. So it could be both. But we presented them as subdivision design standards. So the terms are used interchangeably.
Okay, thank you.
Are you good with that, Commissioner Forbes?
Yes, thank you.
Can I
Yeah.
want to go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes?
And I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say same. Okay, so carries unanimously. We'll move on.
Can I ask a question, a follow-up?
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's out of the order of
We
the
have it.
agenda, but regarding the recommendation that this be presented to city council and then to developers, how is that, what is the timeline for that? And have you proposed or gotten that on the city council's agenda?
Yeah, so I did speak to our interim city manager about when we could place that on a future agenda item. And at the time, the recommendation was to just wait a little bit, because they have a lot of things that are coming to them in the next couple of months. And so we didn't want to overwhelm them with a bunch of changes, and so wanted to time it strategically trying to manage their future meetings. And so I don't have a specific date.
So it's been delayed, basically.
Postpone, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, I hope it doesn't get postponed too long.
No, I don't think it will. It's just we're trying to manage some of the meetings that are coming up. There's a lot of things that are going to be presented, so just trying to
Okay,
make sure we don't.
I might keep asking about it.
Yeah, no, please do. Please do. I encourage you to.
Thank you.
Lily, you have anything?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on to the regular agenda. Just go ahead and read this, just in case. City Council will receive staff recommendations and public input on the following items and may deliberate and take formal action on that item. And 5A, consideration, discussion, possible action on items removed from the consent agenda by commission. No comments there. Move on to 5B, public hearing. Excuse me.
Order.
Consider an ordinance amending Chapter 118 zoning, Article 1, is that 1 or I?
When?
1 in general, Section 118-1 definitions, and Article 3, district regulations, Section 118-273 land use schedule, and Article 6, development standards, Section 118-466, and off-street parking requirements of the Code of Ordinances to allow for development of distillation of liquors, spirits, etc., craft, period.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Elena Helton, City Planner. So this request was initiated by staff, but it was in response to a couple of inquiries that we've received about locating or potentially locating craft distilleries in Nacogdoches. So the way our ordinance currently reads is we do allow for general beverage manufacturing and bottling. That's only allowed in our light and heavy industrial districts, and that's really based on a larger scale production manufacturer's facility. Craft distilleries are much smaller operations. They often allow tours and tastings, and so you have a lot of pedestrians that visit these types of facilities, and they're not necessarily appropriate for our heavy industrial districts. And so we looked at a couple of other cities and how they handle these types of land uses, and based on that, we came up with the proposals that you're going to hear this evening. One of those being allowing this use by right in industrial, but also allowing it in our B2 general business and our B3 central business districts with a specific use permit. And so that would allow the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council to review each of these requests on a case-by-case basis to make sure they're appropriately located and they don't have any kind of adverse impacts on adjacent properties, because they may be appropriate in commercial, but not everywhere in town. And so we want to make sure that, that those are reviewed and approved based on the surrounding area. And so let's get right into it. So the first change that we're going to include, or that we're proposing, is a change to the definition, so actually defining what a distillery, a craft distillery is. And this actually reflects the TABC definition as well. It limits the production of spirits if you're going to actually provide on-premise consumption, and if you're going to provide to-go sales for spirits that are distilled on the premises. And so this just reflects that TABC definition. So this is the little snippet of the land use chart. And so in red, we've added the distillation of liquors, and then the S that you see, that represents the specific use permit in B2 and B3. And then the P is permitted by right. And so again, currently our craft distilleries may operate under beverage manufacturers land use, but that's only in our industrial districts, and we want to encourage smaller scale businesses that have more of a tourist attraction in our more general business districts. Again, they usually provide tours, tastings. They're typically locally oriented and lower impact, and they also can encourage a new entrepreneurial business. This is the little snippet from the off-street parking requirement. So similar to our other manufacturing land uses, staff is proposing one parking space for each 1,000 square feet of non-consumption areas. So that's where they're actually distilling the spirits, and then one per 100 square feet for the consumption area. So think of like a tasting room or an area where people are gathering and actually drinking, almost like a bar. And so that parking ratio is similar to what we would require for a bar or restaurant or similar occupancy where you have a lot of people gathering together. So we did look at some other cities to see how they define or regulate these. And so the city of Lufkin, we actually borrowed their definition of distillery craft, and they allow them in their general business and downtown with specific use permits. Huntsville, Tyler, and San Marcos, they fall under light manufacturing, and they're actually allowed by right in their mixed-use kind of business district, as far as well as some of their other industrial land uses listed in their ordinances. And so I just wanted to give just a brief kind of snapshot of similar situated cities that also have these types of businesses. And so that concludes staff's presentation. Again, this was, the premise of this was based on inquiries that we received for craft distilleries. Think about Front Porch Distillery just outside of town. That type of business could only locate in heavy industrial district here. So they wouldn't be able to locate on North Street or University or downtown where you have more pedestrian-oriented businesses. So we want to encourage more businesses like that. Again, there are tourist attractions, they can be a destination, and can essentially not only increase the tax base, but maybe create some more job growth in the community as well. And so with that, I'll go back to the summary page and open it up for questions from the commission.
Just out of curiosity, what's the difference between how we handle this versus the beer?
Yeah, so in 2009, we updated the ordinance again to allow for microbreweries.
Okay.
Because they also fell under the beverage manufacturer, which was only allowed in industrial. So in 2009, we added microbrewery to the land use chart and also allowed it in B2 and B3 with a specific use permit. So we tried to model that because it was similar as well. And then the Fredonia Brewery actually got their specific use permit in 2015. So it was a few years after that we got our first one.
Sorry.
Thank you. The chart that you showed that compared us to the other cities that used light manufacturing versus distillery craft, does distillery craft, does that give any advantage to using light manufacturing
Well,
as a definition?
yeah, so distillery craft, it just better defines it as a smaller operations and allows us to make a distinction between that and beverage manufacturing. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a understanding that this is kind of treated differently, a different land use than beverage manufacturing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, it does. I was just curious if that made it any more accessible for opportunities for like the tastings that you mentioned and you know, like the restaurant style setting versus light manufacturing. To me sounds like a facility where employees go in with hats on, you know, hard hats, and a distillery sounds like.
Yeah, a lot of these communities, when they talk about their business district, it's actually their old industrial district. And so you have these older industrial zonings that are now operating more as like an entertainment district. And so they, I guess, didn't feel the need to update the ordinance or amend it, because a lot of these areas are actually zoned industrial, so that would be allowed by right anyway. Whereas we have actual separate unique zoning district just for downtown that's different than anywhere else. And so because of that, I think it was necessary to create some distinction and add it to the land use chart.
Makes sense to me.
Are these,
Thank you.
sorry,
Oh, I did.
thank you.
Yeah.
Are those existing businesses asking for opening up kind of like tasting rooms? Like, I mean, or are they new businesses coming in, applying for permits with you?
The inquiry that we received was just very preliminary in nature. They haven't opened up a business yet, but they're starting to look at their business model and look at some properties in town. And so that was what made us look at our ordinance again and realize, oh, these aren't actually allowed by right in more commercial areas. So we should do something about that, because you don't want a pedestrian-oriented business really in your heavy industrial areas. And so the particular business that we spoke to, they are developing a business plan, but it's one that it's an entity that I've never heard of. So it would be actually a local person.
Would it be production of spirits or, okay. And so also they were thinking about tasting rooms as well and looking
Yeah.
for, okay.
Yeah, so tasting rooms, they can also do tours, and they can sell directly to the consumer, and this would allow them to sell bottles to go as well. Now, they can't sell to local retailers and grocery stores, so they sell to other wholesalers, but on premise, they can sell with limited production.
Okay.
And the
Thank you.
fact that they didn't have anything else on the agenda tonight, so we needed something. So,
We,
A couple questions.
yes, ma'am.
Unless you're.
No, no, go ahead.
So, where does this no more than 2 750-milliliter bottles to a person in a 30-day period, where does that come from? Like, if I wanted to buy bottles for all my non-existent relatives.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
For Christmas, would I only be able to get 2?
so that comes directly from the Texas, the TABC.
Beverage Commission.
Thank you very much, Texas Alcohol and
Aren't you
Beverage
familiar
Commission.
with them?
And so we just essentially copy and pasted that definition from them.
Does that hold true for a liquor store?
No, because
No.
it's a different permit type. So the distiller's permit is a D permit. It's a manufacturer's permit, which is different than a retailer's permit. So they all have different rules about who they can sell to and the volume that they can sell to, and in order to just regulate the industry.
Does the brewery have to sell their beer to a distributor and then it ends up in Kroger's?
No,
Or do
no,
they
so
sell
the-
directly to Kroger's?
Breweries can sell directly to the retailers, but they also have maximums on the production of that. So they can sell directly to the consumers, retailers, but again, those, they're kind of maxed out on how much based on the type of sale.
So theoretically, the company or business could get both. They could get a permit to be a
Distillery.
distillery. But could they also get a permit from TABC, and go through that process to be a retailer too, if they wanted to, and it be within our guidelines, or no?
I would have to double check. I'm not entirely sure.
That's a good question.
Maybe a liquor store. And
Yeah.
But they may
distillery,
carry that
yeah.
distinction just to sell
Yeah.
their own
Yeah.
more
No,
than
that
2
makes
bottles.
sense.
Well, you look
Yeah.
at like Red House Winery, they're a tasting room and they also sell their wines.
Yeah.
The problem is this 3,000 gallons annually is
Yeah.
pretty limiting.
It's very limiting.
How do you track that?
So they have to report to the state every year in order to renew their permit. And so there's very specific numbers they have to crunch and provide, and that's just part of their annual reporting.
What if they wanted to have a tasting room without actually manufacturing it on site? Would this allow them to do that?
So they can only sell the product that they make.
That-
Right on site?
Yes, ma'am.
So the one that's located right outside of town, isn't it called the Back Porch Brew?
Front
They-
Porch
Front
Distillery,
Porch.
I believe. Yeah. So they can sell their alcohol, but they can't sell like Deep Eddies or Tito's because that would function more like a bar and less of like a tasting room.
So they could set up a business here in the business district and sell that product that they make just outside of town?
Theoretically, yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. It's very confusing.
Yeah, and I think these rules are set up to create checks and balances between competition between these types of manufacturers. So that's why there's so many rules and regulations and limits on the production.
Can I ask about the parking?
Mhm.
So, let's say that this business ends up being located, just theoretically, where the Piney Woods computer repair store is, which is right next to the public parking. Does that public parking and the street parking count towards their parking allotment?
So it's
How does that work?
different for B2 general business than it is for B3, which is like the downtown area. So in our downtown area, the parking ratio is 1 per 1,000 square feet, regardless of the land use. And so you actually get a more relaxed parking requirement in downtown because the idea is more walkable. There's a lot of public parking, and so this would really apply more to like your B2 general business, like North Street, University, those types of places, because the downtown does have its own unique and separate parking ratio.
So this off-street parking requirement for a tasting room, it says 1 for each 100 square foot, but that would only be if it's in B2, not in B3.
Yes, ma'am.
So if it's in B3, it's a 1 per 1,000.
1 per 1,000, and then there's a magic number. It's not magic, but there's a number that says if your parking demand is higher than like 10 spaces, then you have to provide additional. So there is a cap. It's not just 1 per 1,000, and so it says generally it's 1 per 1,000. But if it's if your parking demand based on your square footage is much greater than that, then you may have to provide additional off-street parking. Usually, what happens is because the parking ratio is so flexible, and so generous that most businesses don't have to add parking when they move into town because, or when they move into the downtown, because usually it's a like-for-like type of activity and doesn't generate any additional traffic.
So if it was at Piney Woods and it's completely surrounded by public parking, how does that business come up with an additional space if it's determined that they need to? Where would they get that space?
They could do a shared park agreement. So we have a tool that allows businesses to share parking with each other if one has more than they need, or if they have uses that are open at different times. So we do allow for that. We also, people can also seek a variance to our parking requirement to get a reduction in overall parking based on their business plan, and that goes to our zoning board of adjustment. And so those would be the two primary processes.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Thanks, Elena.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there any public comment? Anyone? No? Close public comment, open up for council discussion. Is there any other council discussion?
I think this is great. I support it. I hope this business comes.
Yeah. We also did discuss this with our Main Street manager and historic sites, and they were also very excited. So our Main Street department was excited about the addition.
How long ago was it that we were dry county?
Oh, gosh.
It's been a long time. I mean, there's been some aspects of the county are still dry.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's been decades that it was completely
Yeah.
dry. We used to have the private club here in Nacogdoches, and that was
Yeah, that's right, the memberships.
the membership.
That
That's
was
Yeah.
in the 80s.
it
And
was even
90s.
too, even early
90s.
2000s,
Yeah,
if I
early
remember
2000s.
correctly.
I
But
feel like I remember in the early 2000s also.
that's since
We've come a long
gone.
way, haven't we?
Can I ask about, there was a controversy about an Applebee's coming in, and they wanted to stay open till 2, and everybody said no. Well, somehow they didn't end up coming because they wouldn't, I guess, if you serve alcohol, you have to close by midnight, is that,
Midnight on every day except
Saturdays.
Saturday night.
and that wasn't good enough for Applebee's?
Yeah, so there, you have to get an additional permit for late night hours. And so I think that was, or they stated that was one of the reasons why they didn't choose to locate here, was because they couldn't obtain the late night mixed beverage permit. I don't know how true that is. I've been to other Applebee's in other areas where they are open till 2 o'clock, especially in college towns. But I don't know if that's their standard everywhere.
I think they want to be open till 2, but we wouldn't let them.
Yeah, yes, the council did, I do remember reading about that and the council denying it.
Just curious.
Yeah,
So it is midnight except Saturdays. Not that I ever up them.
and this would still require for businesses that are located within 300 feet of a residential district, a specific use permit, but it already requires a specific use permit. So a lot of places that serve alcohol or mixed beverages that aren't associated with a brewery or distillery, they still have to go through a specific use permit if they're in close proximity to a residential neighborhood. And so that may have been, I think that may have been part of the case too, is they were kind of in close proximity to a residential area.
Do we have a motion?
I would like to make a motion, but I wanted to, before I
Oh, absolutely.
do so, I wanted to make sure that I was asking specifically, this would be to amend the zoning ordinance as written, that, or all the amendments in one motion,
Yes.
right? Okay. Then I would like to make a motion that we accept these amendments or advance these amendments for zoning ordinance as written.
I second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. And so carries.
Thank you.
Great.
Good questions, team, good questions.
As I was looking back at the subject here, I was going, okay, changing this, changing this. Is that one action?
I'm learning a lot about you guys. We need liquor in downtown, and we need to stay open till 2 a.m., so.
I don't really,
No, I'm kidding.
yeah.
So Maggie and I party all the time. Just
Yeah.
kidding.
We don't even start
Three-
partying until midnight.
Yeah, I'm usually in bed by that time.
I'm
Yeah, me too.
well ahead of that.
Well, I always learn a lot from you, Elena. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Elena.
Item 6, discussion possible action on future agenda items. Planning and zoning member may inquire about a subject for which notice has not been given. A statement of specific factual information or the recitation of existing policy may be given. Any deliberations shall be limited to a proposal to place a subject on an agenda for a subsequent meeting. Is there any items?
So we will for sure be meeting next month because we're gonna have a zone change request, but that is the only thing that we have slated so far.
Can we please put something about like a green belt overlay, information about that?
That would be great.
Greenbelt overlay in regards to.
Just information, just like a workshop or
okay.
something, a small little workshop talking
Yeah.
about, thinking about future possibilities.
Okay,
Flood, greenbelt overlay / floodplains.
okay.
You said something about form and something zoning,
Oh,
is it
we were talking the other day, form-based code.
form-based code.
Mm-hmm,
I would like you to present
okay.
something on that. I mean,
I can also send the board
That
just
would be
general
great.
information.
That would be
I can,
great.
okay,
Send that out, and if you still
Yeah.
want to recommend a workshop on it, we can
Okay.
do that too.
sure.
So, all about learning.
Yes, of course. Okay.
Any other items? If there's nothing else, then anything else, Madam City Planner?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Well,